Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been in the series before, the goal of the series is to help you take your ideas and then to realize them in 3D space inside of Blender. And that's what we're going to do. This job that you're going to be seeing is something that I was working on for a company to help them create a logo animation for one of their movements. And that's what this project is all about. I'll be able to take you through the tutorial of how you can do it and apply it to your logos and images and things like that, as well as how it ended up. Hope you guys enjoy this series, and stay tuned for more videos like this. Don't forget to hit that subscribe as well, because it really helps support the channel and all the cool content that I'm hoping to create in the future. Thanks so much, guys. Let's get started.
True value. Help is just around the corner.
Modeling the map pins. These pins will later be used as the object reference for our particle simulation. But for your project, you don't have to use pins. It can be whatever object you sculpt or desire it to be. But in this case, for the job I was working on, map pins were the objects that I needed. Modeling the map pins. The first step was to get our two basic objects, the sphere and the cylinder. From there, it was as simple as taking the cylinder and matching it to the shape and size of a pin in ratio to our top of the map pin, our cylinder. Then we grabbed the bottom, shrunk it down so it would have a sharp point like a pin to go into a map would, and then we subdivided both the sphere and the cylinder to be able to create a smoother surface. Shading the map pins. Here I add the metal and plastic textures as well as materials with bump maps. If you didn't know, textures are a pattern that breaks up the uniform appearance of the material. Material is the optical properties of an object, its color and whether it's dull or shiny. And bump maps are the textures that store the relative height of pixels from the viewpoint of the camera. It basically creates a texture or a 3D layer to it on a regular flat surface. The next step was shading both the cylinder and the sphere. The cylinder was going to be metal, so it was as simple as just cranking that metallic slider all the way up on your BSDF shader and then moving the roughness to the amount that you wanted. You also can decide the reflectiveness based off of the roughness and your metallic shader. From there, it was to work on the ball, and the ball was supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be plastic. And so I had no clue what in the world I was doing, so I searched YouTube, of all things, and the video that I found that was super helpful, I'm going to link below, because as much as I'd like to be able to explain it, this guy can explain it so much better to you. So go ahead and check that video out if you're wanting to learn how to create a plastic texture. And once you've got that done, we just popped that into there, and boom, we now had our properly done plastic shade, but we needed a color. So using our BSDF principal shader, we just added in the color that we wanted, and the next thing you know, we now have two textured objects shaded and ready to be performed in our animation. So it was time to move on to the next step. Creating the base mesh. The base mesh will allow the particle system guidelines to work within, basically creating a boundary for our particle system. A base mesh is a simple 3D model that is used purely as a starting point for sculpting. A particle simulation is used to simulate large amounts of small, moving objects, creating phenomena of higher order like fire, dust, clouds, smoke, or fur, grass, and other such things. I needed a map of the United States for this project, and I didn't want to model it myself, so I went onto the internet, found a free one, and popped it into Blender. Now, the mesh was, let's just say, janky, and what you're seeing is me literally cleaning up the mesh. I still don't know how to do it better, and I'm sure there's a better way, but that comes with time, I guess. But thankfully, after a little bit of work, I was able to get a mesh that could work and become the guidelines for our pin animation, which was great. So from there, we were able to move on into doing the particle system, and this mesh would act as a guideline for the particle system we were about to create. Applying the particle system. Now that we have the base mesh, the particle system is applied to it. Now that we have our base mesh ready to go, we just popped on a particle system, upped the number of particles that we had, and set the object of our particles, rather than spheres or triangles or things, to an object. And that object was our pin. You guessed it, the model that we made earlier. But the neat thing is, it doesn't have to be a pin. You can apply it to be whatever you want it to be. Once you have that, go ahead and adjust the rotation that you have, the size that you want it to be, and boom, you are ready to go into the next step, creating the background. Now we create the background plane, as well as add the texture for the aesthetic. First, pop in a plane into Blender, easy as that. Go to the principal BSDF shader, change the color to what you want it to be, then add in a bump map for texture. This will allow you to have more texture and create a sense of depth in your final rendered scene. Plus, it makes the overall shot look a lot better than just a flat plane. Adding the lights and camera. Now that the scene is set, we need to add the lights for a dynamic look and a camera to capture it. Light, an origin from which light is simulated within a virtual setting. Camera, an object that provides a means of rendering an image from Blender. I decided to go with a 3-light setup, one in the top right, one in the bottom left, and one up above for an overall scene lighting. The one up above was just a white light, and it was cranked up into a high wattage to be able to show everything off. The one in the top right was a blue to create a gradient, as the bottom left was a yellow. These two would merge colors and create a dynamic lighting that also cast shadows from the pins, as we were using Eevee to render this sucker. Creating the second particle system. To create a transition between the two particle systems, we need to import our logo. Now, in your case, you don't need our logo. You can put whatever image you want it to be. From your logo to a picture that you desire, this can be working with anything that you want it for your particular project. Transition, the process or a period of changing from one state or condition to another. Note, if your logo is a PNG or picture is a PNG, you will need to convert it to an SVG. Convert the SVG curves, as they import as curves, into a mesh, and the mesh into your particle system. Curves are objects like meshes, but differ in that they are expressed in terms of mathematical functions rather than as a series of points. Mesh is a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that describe the shape of a 3D object. The first step is to import your new logo or image, whichever you're using. From there, you're going to need to convert the SVG curves into a mesh by selecting all the curves from one of the objects, then Ctrl-J'ing them and converting them to mesh. From there, you're going to add the particle system you've already created from your previous object and add it to that object or logo. From there, go ahead and edit that with the rotation, the size, and the alignment of all those particles. Then you're going to bring it into your scene and you'll be able to use it just like that. Finalizing the last pieces. Now we're into the final stages of your render and we get into the fun parts. First, the animation. Go ahead and change the start and end times of your particle simulations if you want the two particle sims to transition from one into the other. This can be done with the start and end or the lifetime. Usually they'll work hand in hand. The particle lifetimes are basically allowing how long the particles live after they've spawned. From there, you're going to have that clean transition going in pretty clearly. Tweak anything with the lighting that doesn't look right, and set up your camera to be just right at the angle that you want it. Add an animation to the camera if you want, and you're ready to go into rendering. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial. Hope that it helps you out with your projects and however you'd want to use it. And link below if you work on any of those projects. I'd love to see what you guys do with this. Anyways, it's time to go into the final render.